Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to our continued coverage. There is a bug on my wall, but that is okay. I'm going to keep recording. Of World Cup 2021. Now, the format of the World Cup is they play a game on day one of classical chess. On day two, they play the second classical game. If it's tied 1-1, then they play the tie breaks. And that's mini matches of 25-minute, 10-minute, 5-minute, and then Armageddon if necessary. Today, we will say goodbye to 64 players. And it's called a long trip home because can you imagine flying all the way to Russia from who knows where you live and just getting to play 2 games of chess and that's it? And then you get knocked out. You got to go all the way home. I mean, is there even that much stuff in Sochi? Anyway, I'm going to take you through 4 games and then we will take a look at the overall standing. So, Alexander Fier from Brazil, very strong grandmaster versus Jurgusz, I believe Pechak is how you pronounce that, but I don't know. From Slovakia, 19-year-old grandmaster. This is actually their second game of the rapid playoff, so this is the second 25-minute game. And I know you all asked for flags. I can't do flags. There's no feature on chess.com that allows that when I load in the games. Anyway, we have bishop c5, bishop c4, a little Italian action. Gioco pianissimo with c3, d3. We'll see what white does with the pawns over here. Bishop g5, h6. Very provocative system, and there's actually positions where black just plays g5, and white actually likes that. And well, here black has played g5, and white is happy because white actually makes black overextend the pawns a little bit, you know, black castles. White plays bishop h2 and is just waiting. You'll notice that like white could castle, but if white castles, then black has many lines where they can actually continue to roll these pawns, and these pieces have to get out of the way. So white doesn't castle, white just stays patient. And now once black has played the move knight to g8, it's pretty clear what black wants. Black wants f5. You play a move like castles, black plays f5, black is very happy. Black is actually better here because you would lose control of the center if you played like this. So what does white do to prevent f5? Very good, g4. But g4 grants black access to this square, so knight e7, a5, d5. This is a big decision. Black voluntarily opens up the center of the board. And it's, you know, logically it should be white who is unhappy here, given that the king is right here. After pawn takes d5, knight d5, it's important to note that this pawn is not hanging, because if you play knight takes e5, you are just going to get smashed down the e-file, considering your king is still here. So white plays queen b3 attacking the knight, and black goes for a transformation like this. Gets the bishop, gives away the knight. But by making this nice pawn blob, white has now dominant control of the center. What do I mean by that? d4. Now, 5 pawns that white has are on dark squares to counteract the dark squared bishop. This knight cannot move into the middle at all. This bishop cannot really move too well. And yes, you can deliver a check with the rook, but then I will literally just move my king and go here. And it doesn't matter to me that you gave me a check. My king is completely safe. Now, black needs to justify all of this play with this move f5. This move has to happen. Otherwise, the position doesn't make any sense for black. You've completely destroyed yourself strategically. None of your pawns can move. None of your other pawns can move. You play h5, I take it. I play rook g1, you get checkmated. This doesn't make any sense, playing like this. I mean, you got to play f5. And so black hesitates. And I really wonder what black was wondering after f5. Like, did they think that d5 was going to come attacking the knight? Black decided to play knight e7, a move that I can only imagine was to prepare this right away. But in chess, the concept of time is everything. And you would think, like lazily, well, white should just castle. That's normal move. You're not wrong. But white has a very aggressive move in this position. Now, aggressive not meaning queen takes b7, finding a way to lose your queen. Aggressive meaning pawn play. How to open up the position. Pawn breaks. There's only one. And it's this. And this is a super crucial move. And I can only assume black just thought that move was impossible because after bishop takes g4, I mean, you get a pawn, I guess. But this doesn't really stop anything. The avalanche is coming down this side. This is protected. And if you play a move like h5, and it looks like you've held everything together with the move h5, because obviously I can't take, this is terrible for black. This position's very bad. Your position is borderline completely collapsing already. I just need to get rid of this bishop. And now black is forced to play passively. So in this position, I would have expected long castles, but Fier plays this, which is a strange move. I don't understand this move because I assume that after a trade of pieces and a queen trade, a subsequent queen trade, that this should be very good for black. By very good, I mean not dead lost. So, yeah. Whereas doing it like this allows white to castle. And Fier did not need a second invitation, despite losing a pawn and potential danger over here. Does he need to do anything about it? No, it's just a check. Don't be afraid of ghosts. Rook h5. And now you are ready for the double up to h7. Queen a1, king c2. There's nothing there. Here, here, and here, perhaps the move of the game, as black is desperately trying to defend. If you give black one move, like let's just say you take on c8 like a lazy person, and then you like trade rooks or something, I mean, the attack can really quickly fade if you're not careful. I mean, even with all this, there is queen takes b7. But let's just say for some reason you missed that too. I don't know. Can you hear that airplane? My windows are open. Excuse me, can y'all relax? I'm trying to record here. So here, the move of the game, the absolutely savage move, bishop to g8. Or, I should say, bishop g8. And the game is over, because if you take it, check and mate on f7. If you take the rook on h5, then queen f7. Absolutely savage. And, well, c4 was played in the game, and black resigned. And black was knocked out subsequently by Alexander Fier, who made it to the round of 64. Very nice game, very nice attacking game. And second game of the day I'd like to show you is the game between Ahmed Adli and I think you say Abdelrahman Hesham. And they're both from Egypt. They're both from Egypt, which is kind of brutal. Like, you got like multiple players from Egypt in this round of 128 and two have to play each other because of the way that sucks. Anyway, this is another playoff game. This is a rapid game. Adli's like 2,600 and Abdul Rahman is like 2,397, like lower rated GM, has lost rating, but came to fight and plays the pseudo Banco. It's like a Banco gambit, except there's no pawn here. So there's no real gambit, right? So we have bishop to g5, g6, takes. And essentially white is saying, I'm giving you the dark squared bishop. You are more than welcome to put this bishop over here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to chip away at your pawns. I have dominant control over c4. If you ever play f5, I'm going to try to play e5, and I'm going to be very happy. But what does black have? Ha 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 ha. Dark squared bishop goes. So here, here, here. Okay. Very imbalanced position. Black is essentially wondering whether or not the move f5 is going to happen. If black can successfully play f5 and activate the dark squared bishop, black will be happy. White can play moves like this, activating the rook. Optically, that does look very strong, and then maybe even something like this to try to get like this position or a position with the knight on c3. But black still has lots of dynamics. The more the board opens up for the player with the bishop pair, the happier they are. And so black just kind of takes space. And yes, white has good control of the center, very nice outpost for the knight on c4, but the position is still very fluid. Queen d2, knight d7, and white begins to chip away at that pawn wall. The problem is that the way that white did this, you allowed black to get a powerful knight. Now, you also get a very powerful knight. So whose powerful pieces are more powerful? Let's ask this question. Who is happier in this position? The answer actually is white. White is more happy because the second that this bishop comes alive, it will be bad news. Not just because you win a pawn, but because you have something known as the outside pass pawn, which if you get rid of b2, just beelines down the other side of the board. The knight on c6 looks pretty, but does nothing. Okay, kind of like me as a content creator. This knight on c6 is just optical. I mean, it's like, oh, very strong. And the same thing with the bishop on c4. It just stands there. So, remember I told you a long time ago that at some point the move f5 would happen? Now the air conditioner is making noise. Everything is making noise today. f5. And you'll notice that Abdelrahman actually sacrificed the pawn. Look, a4. If knight takes pawn for free, f5. This is bad news because after f5, e takes f5, bishop b2, one guy in this position has an asset, and it's this pawn. And after it takes a3, this is devastating for white. Not to mention there's also some bishop c3 forks, and you constantly have to battle poor piece coordination. So instead of that, Adli decided to sacrifice a material. He decided to sacrifice his rook for the bishop and try to play for f6 and queen g7 mate. So f6 was played by black to prevent getting mated. And here, for example, if Adli would have played this move, there's no attack. It's all a giant illusion. You take on c4, you will never get mated. So bishop comes back, and now very clutch move g5. This is just so smart. If queen takes f6, free pawn, queen g7, and look at that, and you basically force a queen trade. Once you simplify the queens off the board, you are no longer under any pressure. Rook versus bishop imbalance becomes much more prevalent in the endgame, and the a-pawn will run. So Adli just tries to desperately avoid a queen trade, but in doing so, gets himself into an even worse situation, and gets his queen hunted down on the h-file. Queen g3, and he tried to not get a queen trade, so they went for the queen and the king. All right, the queen lured the enemy back to the king, and this is bad news. Look at this flashy move. If you take, we have check, and here we have another check. Look at this dynamite double rook sacrifice, and queen takes g4, and it's over. It is over. King f1, knight d2, picks up the queen, and Adli resigned, knocking him out of the World Cup. The upset victory for Abdelrahman. Very complex game that he ended up winning with the black pieces. Another game I wanted to show you from a match that was extremely fun. I think these guys played 6 games. All of them were decisive. Timur Gareev, I actually played him recently in the Vegas tournament, versus Ting Yao Tin, who is from Singapore, but I've never actually, I don't think I've ever heard of him. I mean, maybe I've played him in some Blitz games, but seems to be quite a strong player, maybe on the up and up. I'm just verifying this. No, I actually made a mistake. In their playoffs, these two played 4 decisive games, but they drew their first 2 classical games. So this is the final playoff game. Timur has a 1-0 lead in the 10-minute portion, and now Ting Yao has to win with the white pieces. So we get a Grunfeld defense. White plays something known as the Russian system in trying to get this and this, which there's a lot of theory. And Gareev plays this. So he just immediately explodes the center of the board. We have takes. Queen f4 check, knight d7, queen d4, and essentially white says, I have an extra pawn, and I'm going to hang onto it, and there is nothing you can do about it. Timur says, no, there is. I mean, I can play like e6, and you're a couple of moves away from getting castled. So first of all, if you take on e6 in this position, then black will go here. And then if you trade queens with me and just play like a bishop move and say, well, I'm up a pawn, I'm so smart. No, this can get very ugly very quickly for white. Grunfeld is all about sacrificing material, pawn exchange for activity. Rook c3 and like knight e4 just comes in, and I mean white is in trouble here. I mean there is a lot of tactical threats. There are, I mean, all sorts of. So what happens often in Grunfeld positions is the game peters out. Like you trade a lot of pieces in all the tactics, and you can't really get a whole lot. But Ting Yao did a very good job maintaining the squares, control over the squares of Timur's pieces. And all of Timur's pieces are standing, but they're being controlled. There's not a lot of ways for black to attack the white position here. Now, if a move like a6 were to get played to try to remove the defender of d6, the knight jumps in and then takes the bishop. If you take my queen, I take your queen. And we actually do get something where there is some imbalance, despite there not being a pawn deficit for black. But Timur is a smart man and creates complication here with the move f5. And this makes the game absolutely nuts. So bishop to e2, takes in the center and attack the queen with the bishop. The queen rotates over to b4 to maintain defense and attack on this knight on g4. Black plays this, but Ting Yao has seen the danger levels video. He knows that what's worth more than a knight is a queen. Bishop to g5, counter shot. Also rook defends the pawn. Queen moves, knight jumps into c7. This is under pressure. a5 is an attempt to allow the queen to take the pawn, but dislodge any sort of defense. Okay, let's do it. Let's have some fun. E4, bishop C3 is a threat. Whoa, 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 whoa. What about like a knight move? So if knight D4, he would have lost this pawn. Two knights would have been under attack. It would have been pandemonium. He would have had to find knight C back to B5. Bishop D4 can take. If knight takes D6, bishop F2 is devastating. So there would have been all sorts of other tactics where he has to come back and take the bishop and then avoid getting hit on the F2 square. So instead he castles and wants Timur to take the knight. Bishop F3, rook C7, DC7, queen C7 is a possibility where white has the extra rook, but black has the extra two knights, but white has the extra two pawns. But that doesn't happen either because Timur plays bishop to C3, counterattacking the queen. Queen moves to B5, bishop comes back to D7, the pawn is blocked, and now any rook move hits the queen. So we have knight D... I just said any rook move hits the queen. He's not concerned. Rook F5 comes in. That's a fork. That is a fork. But queen to B4 here, if rook takes G5, queen D2 attacks the rook, and there's nowhere for it to go that's convenient. What do I mean by that? If the rook comes to E5, bishop takes, queen F4 with the fork. Oh my goodness, what is going on? So Jinyo must have thought, all right, I'm in some trouble here. I gotta bring my knight back. Can he take my bishop? If he takes my bishop, I have knight E7 check. I'm very clever, but there's knight takes D5. And if you play rook takes D5, then there's rook takes D6. This is hit, this is hit, this is hit, this is hit, this is hit. He would have had to give up his queen. Instead of that, he played bishop takes G4. Now the rook is hit to the bishop. If rook takes, then bishop takes. White is very happy. But rook takes D6 anyway. Now the queen is hit. The bishop is protected. This is still under fire. And when the dust settled, in this position, Timur was up a knight. Super insane game, which ultimately results in the stabilizing of the position. Timur is a clean knight up, brings back all his pieces, coordinates them well, and he goes on to win versus Ting Jingyao. And wow, what an insane game. It wasn't over here, but I mean, basically, you know, he just consolidated and traded queens, and oh, heartbreaking game, absolutely heartbreaking game. So folks, that brings me to the final game that I wanted to show you. This is a game between a Romanian grandmaster, Iordachescu, I think that's how you say it, and a young player from Russia, Volodar Murzian. Volodar is like 14 years old, I think, and very talented, maybe 15 years old. This is their 6th game, or maybe 8th game. Their playoff was super long, and it was a Caro-Kann defense advanced variation with bishop f5. White played bishop e2 and c3, and the whole point of this setup is to reinforce the center, oftentimes to take space on the queen side away from black's play. Murzian plays h6 to avoid the bishop getting trapped. a4, a5, knight a3, knight e1. I mean, just a weird variation, right? And white is just playing maybe for f4, maybe for b4, maybe to trade this bishop and bring the knight to d3. Not very clear, but we have some clarity. Knight c2, g3. Okay, clearly the point is to go f4. So black doesn't have a lot of time to sit around and needs to create some counterplay. White plays h4 because h5 basically traps the knight. Basically he's not afraid. Volodar Murzian seems to be unafraid of this. Now, I would be terrified because while all of these pieces are reassuring the king that he is safe, they are also not doing anything. The only way that Volodar is going to bring any of his pieces back into the game is by moving one of these two pawns, which will weaken his king. So knight e3, queen d7, f4, and now he has decided to play the move f6. Now, it will actually, surprisingly, was a little bit better to not bring your pawns up, but to play a move like bishop g4. This is a very, very deep move. The point is that if black ever plays the move f6 now, you immediately swarm the target. Bishop g4 is a move played understanding that the only way black will ever get out of this is by pushing pawns, anticipating that pawn movement so that you can then do something about it. But white does the human move, which is basically let me take as much space as possible with my pawns, which kind of makes sense. So takes, bishop g4, and now there is a difference. The difference is that black is actually getting a little bit active. So b3, a little bit of counterplay, or play, not counterplay, is created on the queen side. Knight back to e7. And like, the truth is, how does black activate? I mean, black has no moves, right? No, you're actually wrong. Step 1, activate the bishop. Bishop cannot be booted. Queen b5, queen c8, no queen trade, and a counter shot over here. Rook c1, and now a nice idea. Rook a6, high level move. Rook comes in front of the queen and we create a cannon. This bishop is super powerful, but is somehow being maintained over here. Rook e1, and now knight d6. That is the other idea of putting the rook over here, as you will attack the queen and maybe get to c4 or to f5. Okay, there it is. And all of a sudden, one guy begins creating the initiative, and it's the guy playing with the black pieces. White plays queen d2 stabilizing, and now rook e8. And every piece in black's position has come alive. If we just back up 10 moves to move, no, it would be more like 15 moves. Like, here, what was even going on over here? I mean, like, look at this position. Everybody is really sad. And then you go over here, and all of black's pieces have come alive. I mean, this piece is probably the most passive, because this is the biggest weakness and it needs to defend it. Bishop takes d6. Oftentimes, when the momentum of a game is shifting, players don't react to it the same way. And the person who's losing the momentum does something drastic. Bishop takes d6. Why did you do that? Why did you give away the bishop for the knight? Well, you are trying to maybe create an attack. The problem is that black now gets the initiative on the other side of the board, b5. If you take, you give me an outside pass pawn. We saw the power of one a couple games ago. Instead of that, he's playing over here, and he's all in. He's just all in. He's given the pawn away completely, and he's trying to transfer his pieces. So rook b6, rook a1, queen b8. Who's attacking who? Who's attacking? Oh, who's attacking who? If you take, I might even consider taking with the bishop and playing a3, a2. I mean, can you imagine? a3 and a2. Oh my god. So queen a2, takes, queen b3. Wait a minute, I don't understand. Who is attacking who? I'm getting rid of all your pieces. You can take on a4, I'm gonna take on c3. Or am I? Kaboom. Levy, I don't understand. What's so special about that? Just, oh, no. Pawn breaks. So important to identify them at the right moment. Bishop f1, rook c8, rook c4, swap. Uh-oh. If takes, then takes. Where you going? Queen c3. If you take my knight, I take your queen. If you take my queen, I take with my knight. So instead of that, bishop e6, king f8, exclamation point, the best move, being active because you're actually completely safe. Queen b2 check, king moves, and now this is protected. So queen b4, looking for a trade of queens. Not actually, maybe not necessary. I mean, you can play like queen b1 and actually go checkmate the other guy, but he decides to play it safe. White does not play it safe. White keeps that queen on the board. If you take my knight, this is mate in one. It's never too late to hang mate in one. You would know about that. So knight to c3, here, queen takes d4, queen h1, king to g4, bishop f3, king f5, queen h5, mate. And the youngster at this point on camera literally went like crazy. And he is through to the round of 64, and Viorel Iordașescu unfortunately eliminated in a bitter way with a wild finish there at the end. A crazy, crazy game. And with those 4 games, let us take a look at the overall bracket. So top to bottom in the World Cup, we've got Magnus Carlsen versus Sasha Martinovic from Croatia. And the winner of that plays Evgeny Bareev from Canada, Aryan Tari. We might have an all-Norwegian matchup. Wojtaszek Alekseyev, some Russians here, Icelandic Grandmaster Gretarsen. Interesting matchup over here, Dubov Gukesh. Let's see, who are some fan favorites? This is perhaps the only international master remaining, Ravi Haria, who knocked out Vadim Zvagintsev in the playoffs. We've got Jordan Van Forest, Firouzja here playing against Javohir Sindarov from Uzbekistan. This is a fascinating matchup. Šarić versus Pichot. Both of them played in, I think, the Champions Tour, but they are both up-and-comers to the Super GM club as they're trying to hit 2,700. Very intriguing matches, and you all know where to find them, and you all know where to find the bracket. And on the other side, all the way over here, we've got Caruana versus Mekaranto from Indonesia. Indonesia's strongest player, active player, I should say, and a lot of really exciting matchups. So tomorrow, we will begin our coverage of the round of 64 as some of the Super GMs have arrived, like Magnus and Anish and Fabiano and Duda and all these guys. And I will see you then. And if you made it this far in the recap, I appreciate your support. The room will be filled out soon. More consistent uploads are coming. You are awesome, and I will see you tomorrow. Get out of here.